This is Skater XL. A pretty successful early access campaign has led to the fairly recent 1.0 release of this, and can I just say that I'm really happy that skateboarding games are sort of coming back around, back into style again, because growing up I used to love all the Tony Hawk's games, the Pro Skater and Underground, and eventually Skate and things like that, but we didn't really see very much of that stuff on PC, and it's been since like the early 2000s since that's really been a popular thing. So it's nice to see them coming back around again with more stuff being announced and all that, and a couple of games on Steam that are going for this as well, and this is one of them. So Skater XL is probably most similar to something like Skate, but really it's kind of doing its own thing. It's really best described as a skateboarding sandbox, or a skating simulation sandbox, all the S's, because basically it doesn't have like a story or a point system or anything like that. It's really just like you, a skateboard, a place to crack your face on everything and just mess around as much as you want. There's no sort of like scoring system or any kind of campaign to speak of. It's really all about free skating and coming up with your own lines and gaps to just sort of do whatever, and everything is done in this very authentic to physics kind of way, which is one of the reasons why I said if you've ever played Skate that the game will be most familiar to you, but it's even more complicated than that, really. The way that it works is each stick on the controller, by the way, you need a controller to play this, and I don't just mean it works best with a controller, I mean it only works with a controller. It does not have keyboard support, so you'll need a gamepad of some kind to play it, preferably with analog sticks. But the way that it works is each analog stick is a foot. So the right analog stick is your back foot and the left one is your front foot, and you have to move the sticks in the way that you physically would have to move your feet in real life to do the maneuvers that you're trying to do, from just basic stuff like ollies up to like advanced flip tricks like varial heel flips and laser flips and all that, and grinds, grabs, vert stuff. There's just all kinds of things in the game for you to do. There are even these challenges that you're seeing right now that act as combination tutorials and like some sort of structure to give the game some challenging missions to accomplish effectively, and there's a set of challenges for every one of the major locations in the game that aren't modded in, of course, and these are pretty much key to understanding how physically the game actually operates. That controller diagram in the bottom left of the screen, you can actually disable it in-game if it bothers you, but I left it on purpose for the purposes of this video to sort of give you an idea of how it actually operates, to how it controls, because I think it's really unlike just about anything else I've ever played. It's definitely the hardest, most authentic to real physics skateboarding engine that I've ever encountered. It is actually very difficult to do even simple things, not because it's badly designed, but because it is quite authentic to how real physics works, and all of the movements required for even simple tricks, well, they need a lot of practice, and that's why most of the footage in the background is just me kind of messing around, just learning the controls and exploring the areas and just making my own little lines here and there, and just sort of, you can do the same thing as you could do in the skate games where you press a button on the D-pad to set yourself like a checkpoint, and then you can press the opposite button to teleport right to that checkpoint so that you can save yourself at the very beginning of some sort of line that you envision doing cool things on, and then just repeatedly try it over and over again with different tricks and different progressions and things, and just see what happens. And that's basically what the game is entirely about. It's about setting your own goals. Like I said, since it's basically a simulation sandbox and there's no structured campaign or anything, you're just going to visit all the various locations in the game and just make your own fun. And the engine of the game is such that that is very rewarding. Even a simple trick like a basic ollie over a picnic table without bailing is actually really satisfying. This isn't in like the Tony Hawk style where you're going to be like verting 35 feet in the air and doing like triple backflips over houses and stuff. That's not quite the sort of simulation that this is going for. It's definitely a lot more grounded on purpose. So like I said, even simple things like doing a kickflip over a table or something like that is actually really satisfying when you pull it off. The maneuvers are also complex, mechanically speaking, in terms of how to do them, that just doing a basic one successfully feels really nice. For instance, if you want to do just a basic ollie, you move the right stick down as far as it'll go, and then just let it return to center. You don't actually flick it up like in Skate, you just let go of it, and that causes your character to move their back foot to the rear of the board, and then just ollie. It's pretty simple, but that's how it works. And then if you want to do something else, like say add in a flip trick to it, like a kick flip or a heel flip, then as soon as you get into the air, you use the left stick and either move it to straight to the right or straight to the left, and that will cause your leading foot to move straight in that direction and kick the board and make it spin. Just like how it works in real life, and that is exactly how the trick system works as a whole, which led to some really cool moments where I was able to think of a skateboarding trick that I liked and then just do it without actually being told how. I've always been fascinated by things like the hard flip and the laser flip. I could never actually do those in real life. I used to skateboard here and there, but I wasn't that good. And but I was always impressed with them and always wanted to learn how. So, of course, back in the day, I researched how you actually did those, so I just applied that knowledge to this game. How do you have to physically move your feet to manipulate the board to do these tricks? And after I thought about it for a second, I just got some air and then moved the sticks in the way that you think that they should have moved, and it did it. It's actually really satisfying to just not actually go to the tutorials for a minute and just kind of explore the controls by yourself and think, okay, how do I do this trick that I want to do? How do I move my feet in real life to actually do this? And chances are, if you actually manipulate these sticks in the way that you should to mimic that movement in the game, then the trick will happen. You'll actually do exactly what you think you will. That's really neat, and that's why I said it's kind of the most complex, most flexible skating simulation that I've ever come across, because the ability for the game to actually recognize all these movements and physically move the board by manipulating your feet and your hands in the correct ways and actually have it name those tricks correctly, that's really interesting to me. That's really impressive. And the same works for other stuff. Flip tricks aren't the only tricks in the game. You also have grinds, and there is not a button to do a specific grind. Instead, you just have to manipulate your body to line up with the rail in regards to whatever kind of grind you want to do. If you want to do a 5-0, then you gotta try and get a good amount of air above a rail and try and get your board as straight, as parallel as you can, so that you land right on the trucks, right down the center, and do a 5-0. If you want to do like a nose grind, then you want to rotate yourself in the air a little bit to the side of a rail, and then move the left stick so that you move your front foot forward and then down towards the rail so that the nose of your board lands on the rail before anything else, and then bam, nose grind. So it's complex, but it's also intuitive, because even though the controls for doing things are definitely, they take a lot of practice to master, they also make sense. It feels like all of the movements that you're making correspond to the real movements that you would have to make to actually pull those things off. There are also grabs, which are pretty complicated to do. I'm not very good at them, but they are fun. Those use the bumpers to control your hands, the left bumper for the left hand, right bumper for the right hand, and in order to do a grab, you just sort of have to rotate your body in the air and then use the hand that you think should reach for the board to do whatever kind of grab you're looking for. If you want to just do like a basic indie, then you just ollie straight forward and then hold the right bumper to hold your right hand down on the board. Bam, indie, and the melon is the left hand. But if you want to do more complicated stuff like a mute, then you actually have to grab your board in the air and then manipulate your feet to move the board while you're already grabbing it in such a way to do a mute or whatever else you're trying to do. And you can also, of course, spin in the air as well, which leads to the definitely most complicated and difficult part of the game, which is the vert stuff. You'll definitely miss at first the idea that in pretty much any other skateboarding game, you sort of glue yourself gravitationally to line up with a ramp, like a half pipe, if you're on one. That's just how games like that work, because it makes it easier for you to actually do vert tricks. And in this game, you do have vert tricks. It's just a lot more complicated because you have to physically line yourself up in the way that you would actually have to authentically need to have your momentum carry you in the correct direction. You don't gravitate yourself towards the correct alignment. You have to actually align yourself manually, which is difficult. But like I said, again, because it's so difficult and complicated to pull off, it's very, very satisfying when you do, and makes even simple vert tricks like just an ollie transfer from one ramp to another extremely satisfying when you actually pull it off, because of how complicated and difficult a maneuver it is to figure out. Once you actually do get it, you'll feel really good about yourself. The game also has some really solid modding support with really just a big community in general that has done everything from like fake skate brands that you can download like clothing and board textures and stuff for, to publishing issues of like fake skating magazines, to even creating entirely new areas for you to skate around in. There are tons of levels, some big, some small, some street, some skate park, all sorts of things for you to download and enjoy, and the game directly supports loading these things in and just teleporting to them whenever you want. So it's very open for modding. The devs have, from the beginning, supported the modding scene, which is something that, if you know this channel, I always appreciate, and they always get bonus points for, because encouraging your community to create fun things and actually opening up your modding support is always a good idea for variety, for longevity, just good for PC gaming in general. So there are tons of really fun skate parks and cities and things for you to skate around in that people have added, and you can download them very easily. There is a sort of modding hub for the game that allows you to just browse and download whatever you want. Overall, this is definitely a game for the more hardcore skateboarding game fans, because it doesn't have a campaign or anything like that right now, although there are talks that maybe at some point there may be stuff like that added, who knows, but as for the moment, it doesn't have any sort of story mode or anything like that. So this is all about the skating engine and you, and just coming to terms with it and making your own lines and doing whatever you want in a very Sandbox simulation kind of way. So you obviously have to be into the overall gameplay of the game in terms of its simulation, how its physics works, and how its board manipulation works and all that to get the most out of it, because that's what you're going to be doing all the time. It's all about just the skateboard and you. And I honestly think that this creates a certain kind of purity of mechanics in the game that makes it kind of special, because nothing else really does what this game does. There is Session, which I want to take a look at some point, but that's still a little bit different than this. They are not the same game. They're got some different goals in mind and things. And this is very much a sim, you know, and we don't really see stuff like that very often, so it's cool to highlight it, and I'm just endlessly impressed by how flexible and detailed and complex the simulation of the skateboarding physics in this game actually are. The fact that it can name just about any trick that you pull off simply by flailing your feet around in the right way is impressive, and you can even do some stuff like changing grinds mid-grind, and it does actually recognize that. You can even do like shifty stuff in midair by just like flailing your legs around and doing like the shifty movement and all that. The only thing that's really missing is stuff like a boneless. You can't do the boneless, although I'm not really sure how that would work in terms of the stick movements to do it. There is something that does the same, it has the same role as a boneless, the sort of high ollie, which is to use both of the sticks and put them down and then let them return to center at the same time, which does a much higher ollie than usual. So it basically has the same sort of role as what a boneless plays, it's just a little bit different. So overall, it's just a really impressive effort to make a really detailed skating sim, the likes of which I've not really seen before. And if you're into real-life skateboarding, or just skateboarding video games in general, or both, then I think there's a lot that you'll get out of it because of how detailed and complex it is, how much there is to learn. This is one of those games that is difficult to learn, even more difficult to master. And you can put dozens of hours in this in just a couple of basic skate parks, learning the ropes and just how to do basic lines and how to do basic flip tricks one to the next without bailing and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun to mess around in, and a game that's entirely about just messing around with this very detailed skating engine is kind of exactly what I wanted without really knowing at first. I didn't know that I wanted this sort of unstructured sandbox experience until I actually tried it with a simulation this complex and realized that it actually works really well and it's a lot of fun. There seems to be constantly more for you to learn at all times, more ways for you to manipulate the board that maybe you haven't thought of yet, and of course all of those challenges add some structure to the game and help you learn the ropes and also help you do some pretty crazy stuff later on once you are more comfortable with all the controls. It's just a really neat game, and I definitely recommend it to people that love skateboarding games because it's kind of unlike any other I've played. So thank you guys very much for watching. The link to this game's store page is in the description below this video if you want to check it out yourself, and I'll see you guys next time.